Hey strangers, just a note at the top. This episode might be best for our older listeners. I'm Laurah Norton, and this is One Strange Thing, the show where we search the nation's news archives for stories that can't quite be explained. Strangers, we have covered a few cursed objects, and maybe some concepts, on this podcast before. And it's hard to pick one favorite. But the Post Malone Dybbuk box saga, it might just be the most interesting. Then again, there was the Mars Volta album, and the Curse of the Ninth Symphony. Well, we actually could go on. Still, the term cursed, it has lost some of its bite in recent years, or maybe at least some of its specificity. And that is largely due to the existence of cursed images, a genre of memeable internet content. And we must say from the outset, we are fans of the weird stuff that we find online. But in this particular instance, you must understand that the concept itself has shifted the use of the term cursed from literal to, well, figurative. If you're not familiar with the idea, we'll let Paper Magazine explain the origin, which seems to have been a 2015 Tumblr blog called Cursed Images. Its anonymous creator told the magazine, quote, "At the time, I had a voyeuristic hobby of searching the archives of Flickr to look at forgotten flash photography from years in the past. Some of these forgotten photographs just had an eerie mood about them, like someone had captured a moment from a dream or another life. I was particularly interested in finding photos of dark and empty rooms, mannequins and costumes, all of which became common themes among cursed images." Now, of course, this idea took off, and the genre has expanded. Nowadays, a cursed image can be disturbing in all kinds of new and exciting ways. Maybe it's a photo of an especially heinous 1960s recipe, or the photoshopping itself is beautifully horrifying, or the uncanny valleyness of everything just hits right. It can be scary, or unsettling, or weird, or all three at once. But no one who views it thinks they've literally been cursed just by laying eyes on such a thing. However, there are bits of detritus floating around the World Wide Web that are said to actually carry real bad luck that will follow anyone brave or unwise enough to view them. Most that we've personally heard of are videos and not photos, and the lore surrounding them is pretty murky. We found a Reddit post that, honestly, may or may not be satire, and it was posted 4 years ago on the sub Morbid Questions. It reads, in part, "So I was watching a YouTuber's video, and at one part of it, he showed a clip from a YouTube video. I recognize that video as a YouTube video that is said to be cursed. I think the video was entirely red-colored with a man in it. As someone who believes in the paranormal and supernatural, I think I may now be in danger." Strangers, the advice he received in response ranged from "call a priest" to "chill, you're fine" to "I think you are doomed now." You know, the Reddit usual. Anyway, after some investigation, we discovered that this poster, who may or may not have been kidding, was indeed referring to a famously cursed video. We started with that vague description, did a little Googling, and landed on a YouTube video clip that was first uploaded in April of 2008. According to the Creepypasta Wiki, it's commonly known as Marina Moragard-Gleskov, and truly, we have no idea if we've pronounced that correctly, but our best has been done. Now, according to Paranormal Wiki, the video shows, quote, "a man staring at you with a red overlay for the last seconds before the camera cuts to him in the center, now for the last 2 seconds of the clip." Sounds kind of anticlimactic, right? Well, the Creepypasta Wiki made some pretty big claims about the actual nature of the video. Their entry claims that what first circulated, a 20-second clip, was only the beginning, and that there was a longer and more dangerous version out there somewhere. Quote, "This is only part of the actual video. The full video lasts 2 minutes and was removed by YouTube after 153 people who viewed it gouged out their eyes and mailed them to YouTube's main office in San Bruno. It is not yet known how they managed to mail their eyes after gouging them out." We are glad, strangers, that they paused to acknowledge that plot hole. The wiki blamed a number of deaths on the video and wrote that, quote, "YouTube will periodically put up the first 20 seconds of the video to quell suspicion so that people will not go looking for the real thing and upload it." The video itself was only viewed by one actual YouTube staff member who began screaming 45 seconds in. That man is now under constant sedation, apparently unable to recall what he saw. The site goes on to explain that there are, quote, "several versions of the video floating around the internet, some more harmful than others. Don't ask us why that might be, because no clues are given as to where the mysterious original might have come from." And yes, that is quite the story. Or quite the creepypasta anyway. If you've listened to our other episodes on that specific genre of internet horror story, you know that they are both freaky and very much not true. Now, there is a 20-second video floating around. We've also watched the longer version, so YouTube is doing a pretty terrible job of upholding that dark conspiracy. Although we could buy, after some consideration, the idea that YouTube would have a floor of employees who might need constant sedation. We have certainly felt that way after viewing a large number of the videos on the site. But Paranoid Wiki, they have a pretty good breakdown of what actually happened. They reported that the day after the 20-second video first appeared, and you'll recall that was back in April of 2008, a 2-minute version was uploaded as well. These two clips were put on YouTube by 2 different users. That discrepancy created the idea of the secret longer video. But it was just a clever and quick edit. As for the mysterious man in the video, well, he was quickly identified as a real and living person. According to the Ghost in My Machine blog, his real name was Brian Cortez, and he was apparently living in the US Virgin Islands at the time that the video was released. He even had a social media presence, which seemed odd for a mysterious man set on cursing humanity. But though the original video and its longer counterpart were debunked pretty quickly, at least in terms of being anything other than a guy staring at a camera, they were still effective. The clips inspired the creepypasta about eye gouging and corporate YouTube conspiracies that we read just a moment ago. And of course, that was a lot of fun, and thus spread all over the internet. And that began new iterations and more shares. And then we ended up with Reddit posters worried that they might need to call a priest. You see how things like this happen? It slid around in our digital world, creating new iterations and threatening everyone with a really, really bad time, even though a little research would have debunked the whole thing. Or maybe not, because we will admit that video is an uncomfortable watch. We only managed it once, with all the lights on. We'll report back on the status of our eyes and whether they've been mailed to YouTube. It feels silly, sure, but humanity is fascinated with the concept of bad luck, isn't it? And it's even more interesting when we think about how bad luck, a curse, isn't static. Consider the idea that it might cling to a person or even a thing, and then trail it, and then trail the people who might possess it for years, and maybe even through generations. If you've seen The Ring, then you're familiar with the concept of a traveling curse. Watch the VHS tape, and then you have 7 days to show it to someone else and transfer that energy. Otherwise, well, a vengeful ghost comes crawling out of your television screen. We suppose a YouTube video is another version of that, although with fewer rules, especially if someone sends you that link. So are those old chain emails that threaten doom if not forwarded on to everyone that you know. You remember those? The turn of the 21st century was a weird time for superstition, and there's another, looser version that we've come across, tied to yet another form of communication. Because, for a while now, there's been talk circulating the internet of cursed telephone numbers. And we don't mean something like 976 Evil, which was a very bad, or maybe so bad it's good, horror movie about a phone number, one so old it didn't need an area code. If you're unfamiliar, the plot is basically that you call it and you get demonic powers and chaos ensues. You know, the usual. But no, strangers. The cursed numbers that we're referring to are supposedly real, and perhaps more dangerous. The idea of evil phone numbers, or even just spooky ones, they aren't so new. Outside of horror movies, there are plenty of ways to really freak yourself out with a phone call. Way back in the 1990s, you could pull a kind of Bloody Mary-style dare via your landline. Now, to our knowledge, no demonic powers were handed out, at least we hope they weren't. But in Atlanta, if one was brave enough to dial 666-6666, a strange song would play. Now, we checked online, and posters on Reddit remember it as being composed of number tones, and we personally recall feeling extremely brave for punching in those numbers at all. Once area codes were introduced to the city, it no longer worked. We tried very hard to find a sample of the audio so you could hear it in its original form. But alas, we could not. So one of us, the old one, is going to have to go off memory here to recreate what it probably sounded like. It was something like this. And it played over and over. Now, memory may have failed, it's been a minute after all. But it was spooky. While this was very likely some kind of testing line kept open by the local phone company, it was certainly a creepy experience and great entertainment at slumber parties, especially when no one was willing to give you a ride to Blockbuster Video. Or so we've heard. But there have been plenty of other phone numbers with more sinister stories floating around out there, ones that we'd be much less willing to dial or to answer if they called. So, back in the early 2000s, rumors of, quote, red numbers, they began to circulate. According to the 13th Floor blog, a red number is one capable of delivering terrifying and fatal, quote, death calls. We, don't like the sound of that, and you shouldn't either. Per the blog, they're, quote, rumored to kill anyone unfortunate enough to answer a telephone call from a specific number. Now, how did people find out about this? Through emails and text, and of course, online rumor. And as far as we can tell, the earliest rumors of these numbers cropped up in Nigeria and Pakistan. We found a report from CBS News from back in 2004, covering a text message scare which was then sweeping across Nigeria. Apparently, hundreds of people received the following message. Beware, you'll die if you take a call from any of these phone numbers. 0802-311-1999 or 0802-222-5999. Authorities warned citizens that it was a hoax, but people were frightened, A college student told CBS reporters that she'd turned off her phone for 2 days in order to avoid calls. Per the 13th floor, the story in Pakistan was similar, except that the fear was spread through email and not through text. The emails varied in composition, but generally included a few key details. The phone numbers mentioned, aka the red numbers, were the same, and the emails warned that receiving a call from any of them was akin to handling a live grenade. According to the 13th floor, if one was to answer the call, they'd be met with, quote, high-frequency signal capable of causing severe and potentially lethal nerve damage. And that news spread, causing a panic. Per the Ghost in the Machine blog, the red numbers in Pakistan were said to have caused dozens of deaths. Now, who specifically died? No one could ever actually pinpoint that. But people remained frightened, and they were afraid that every time their phones rang, it could spell doom. Really though, when we think about it, the idea of actually finding evidence of a true cursed number, that would be impossible, right? When we apply rationality, it feels merely the stuff of urban legend. Or it would be, except for one strange thing. Strangers, we discovered something odd. Apparently, there is one phone number that has earned at least some of its reputation as being cursed. After all, 3 of its owners have died in a row. According to NPR, the phone number in question is Bulgarian, 0888-888-888 to be exact. Apparently, it had a rather bloody history, at least for a while. Per NPR, quote, 3 people assigned to the number died in a 10-year span. The first one died of cancer in 2001. The next 2 were both gunned down. Reporters noted, though, that the second and third owners were, quote, crime bosses, which certainly brings its own danger. We have to wonder how a single number got assigned to 2 different mafioso in the first place, but no one has explained that so far. The Telegraph reported that the number's original owner was actually a mobile phone executive himself. The man, and please note, we will do our absolute best with the names in this story, was named Vladimir Grasnov, and he was the first to ever be assigned 0888-888-888, and by his own company. When he passed away in 2001, he was only 48 years old, but he died, as we said, of cancer. That is tragic, but certainly nothing that anyone would call paranormal. But there was a pretty strange addition to the Telegraph's reporting on his passing. Quote, despite a spotless business record, there were persistent rumors that his cancer had been caused by a business rival using radioactive poisoning. They, don't go on to explore that any further, so don't ask us. Eventually, the number was reassigned. The second owner, Konstantin Dimitrov, was described by the Telegraph as an estate agent who'd secretly been running a massive cocaine trafficking operation. We aren't sure how long he had the phone, but we do know that in 2003, he was supposedly assassinated by rival crime lords. And then, well, according to 9 News, the number changed hands a 3rd time. The final owner was a crime boss named Konstantin Dishlev, who was, quote, gunned down in an Indian restaurant in 2005 in the capital of Bulgaria. Now, strangers, we certainly don't mean to make light of either violent crime, but we must wonder if the second Konstantin got calls meant for the first, and if they knew one another, and how confusing that must have been for the criminal underworld, especially considering their shared first names and their very illegal professions. As far as we have been able to verify via our English language sources, this entire story seems to be true. So the next question is, were these men doomed by their phone number? 3 deaths in a relatively short time, it does feel odd, and we can see why curse comes to mind. when 3 deaths are associated with a single number. But the story is intrinsically shaky, isn't it? Unlike the red number scare, receiving calls wasn't rumored to bring about ill fortune. Now, 2 of the owners, they did have similar careers, and thus similar deaths. But what about the first owner? Was this meant to be a traveling curse? And if so, what was attached to the number? What was significant about it? How this information was put together by reporters and then released is not totally clear to us. We assume that authorities realized that the 3 deceased individuals had owned the number, but why did they release that to the public? What was the end goal? According to the Telegraph, the issuing provider, Mobitel, quote, suspended the number for good, but we might surmise that that had less to do with a curse and more to do with an ongoing police investigation. Or perhaps just too much bad press. Per NDTV, quote, callers now get a recorded message saying the phone is outside network coverage. And that still seems to be the case today, or at least the last time someone tried to call. We are, not going to experiment with that ourselves. As for the message, well, it's not exactly frightening. It's pretty standard even. But it has helped to boost the story that the line is so jinxed that it must not be used again. So, is there any real evidence of a cursed phone number out there? Of all the hexed objects and coincidences that we've examined over time, we have to say that this one is probably not true. We won't ever fully discount a freaky coincidence, but as far as these digits go, we feel pretty certain that there's not much to go on here. With that said, would we accept 0888-888-888 as our phone number? Probably not. We're not superstitious folks, but we do hedge our bets. We might have dialed 666-6666 a few times back in the 90s. Okay, a few dozen times, just to hear that freaky song, but times have changed. That little trick no longer works, and as for us, well, we've learned a little too much about the world and about the unexplained to play fast and loose with our luck. We hope you'll join us next time for another real-life story from the fine print of America's local papers. From the lives of regular people, just like you and me, except for One Strange Thing. One Strange Thing is an independent podcast. To support the show and to hear more of the entirely true and enticingly peculiar, you can check out our premium options. If you'd like to subscribe on Apple Premium, we've established a new feed where you'll get both premium and ad-free options. And as a bonus, you'll now get ad-free and early releases of our main feed episodes as well. And if you subscribe on Patreon, you'll find ad-free early releases of our regular episodes, full-length bonus episodes, monthly giveaways, and blog posts. We hope you'll check out one of these options and support the show. There's a link in the show notes. And if you enjoy One Strange Thing, please take a moment to leave us a great rating or review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps.